Here we go. We are live. See if we start getting any people. There we go. We're starting to get people in. I usually wait a few minutes. That way everybody can pile in the door, the proverbial web door, so to speak. Welcome to everyone coming in. Just going to give it a few minutes. If you're looking for the Code Platoon webinar, you are in the right place. So rest assured, you didn't stumble into somebody else's chat. We'll give it just a few minutes, give time for people to come in, maybe a minute or two late, and then we'll get going. For those who are already in now, if you have questions, I ask that you put them in the Q&A box if possible. We do have a chat and a Q&A box. It just sometimes they get lost if you put them in both. But if you have questions, type them in. We'll get to them at some point. Give it just about one more minute and then we will get going. Alrighty. So everyone, welcome to Code Platoon's career. Sorry about that. Career Conversations webinar. I am your host, Greg Drobny. I am the Student Outreach Coordinator for Code Platoon. My job at Code Platoon is to talk to incoming and prospective students about their journey into Code Platoon, what it takes, what you have to do to get here, and what your possibilities are, how you get accepted, all of those questions. I'm the guy to talk to, and I'm the guy who usually takes the phone calls and sets up meetings with people just to educate them on what we do. Today, we're starting something a little bit new for Code Platoon, and what we're doing, we usually do webinars that are kind of an educational purpose, just talking about Code Platoon. Today, we're going to be branching out just a little bit, and we're going to be talking to a couple of people who are already in the software development field, and thus giving you, the listeners and viewers, kind of an insight into what potential is out there, what your possibilities are. Both of our guests tonight are military veterans, and they both currently work in the software development field. One is a Code Platoon graduate, one is not. So we get a kind of a diversity of experience there. And so, yeah, that's what tonight is all about. We're going to introduce them, have a little discussion with them, see where that goes, and then open it up for questions and how it relates to Code Platoon and what Code Platoon is doing. I am going to be sharing a slideshow just for a few minutes here while we do the first part, but don't worry, I'm not going to bore everybody with a super long PowerPoint slideshow. It's going to be mostly a conversation. This is just kind of to get us going and give you an idea of where we are. So let me share my screen with everybody. And here we go. All right. Everybody see it okay? Jeffrey, give me a thumbs up. See it? All right, good deal. Charles, good deal. All right, so again, I'm your host, Greg Drobny, Student Outreach Coordinator. With me today is Jeffrey Sanford, a front-end web developer. He was U.S. Army veteran, a Hawk radar repairer. He's been working in the software field for how long, Jeffrey? How many years?
Oh, about 7 years now.
Okay, about 7 years, so a decent amount of experience. And how long were you in the Army for?
6 years.
6 years in the Army, been working tech for about 7 years. So he's with us. And also Charles Kubiak, software crafter at 8th Light. He was in the United States Marine Corps Light Armored Vehicle Commander, and he is a Code Platoon graduate. When did you graduate Code Platoon, Charles?
I graduated Code Platoon in April, May of 2019.
2019, fantastic.
Yep.
So you've been in this for just almost 2 years, coming up on 2 years here real quick.
Yep.
Right on. Now, how long were you in the Marine Corps?
4 years for me.
4 years, fantastic. Light Armored Vehicle Commander. So today we will be talking about first about Jeffrey's journey, then Charles' journey, and then some questions and answers to everyone, opening it up to everyone so that you all can ask questions of professionals who work in the field and get some insight into what it is they do and how they got there. Whoops, skipped over that a little bit. So first off the bat, Jeffrey, tell me just give me a brief overview of first military and then how you got into software and kind of how those two things combined.
Okay. Let's see. I went into the military, into the U.S. Army, and they trained me really well to fix radar systems and do electronics and things. The Army at the time didn't have computers actually pushed out to the commanders and stuff like that. My lieutenant had a Wang computer, that old word processor, but we really didn't have that many computers around. Once I got out of the service, I stumbled upon a job up in Portland working for the Internet Technical Services, Teleport, and I started studying PCs and stuff like that. And I worked in technical support, network administration, network engineering for a good 10, 20 years. And then once the web started developing enough that it wasn't just static web pages, I really, really enjoyed that, and went back to college and got a 2 years associate degree in computer programming, which really didn't give me a lot because I was teaching Java and things like that. But I got out and taught myself the front-end web development, full stack development, our different databases and things like that, and learned on the job. It was helpful to go back to school in organizing my ability to study and learn new things. Programming takes a tremendous amount of study, and it doesn't just end. You're always studying.
Sure, it's kind of a never-ending quest of what you can and can't learn. I mean, it's a never-ending path, for what I understand.
Right, because there's so many possibilities in what you can do. You just have to learn how to do it.
Now, what would you say? You mentioned going to a 2-year, getting an associate's degree in the field. Have you worked with anybody from, or what's your experience with coding boot camps in general, people who come from them, and how does that compare to your 2-year associate's degree?
The coding boot camps are a lot better. The college, it's still wrapped up into academia, so there's a lot of courses that don't really matter that much. You need to get in and start writing code.
Sure.
If you want to write code, you need to write code, and coding boot camps are excellent for that. To get your first projects under your belt, to get things like a portfolio built or things like that, to say I have working code and it worked like this and I can make it better, but I have working code. That's brilliant stuff. You come out of college and you're like, I don't know if my code's going to work.
So you think, like, if you had to do it again and you were aware of something like Code Platoon, 6-7 years ago, that would have been a good fit, in other words.
Oh, absolutely. Right.
Okay. And do you think that, like, is there anything about your military service that helped? I mean, did you tie in anything? Is there something that you got into your computer science, associates, and you're like, oh, this ties into what I was doing, or was it totally foreign to how you'd been trained?
I can't say enough for the military training. The ability to learn very complex things very, very quickly is essential in programming. I don't see how other people do it.
Sure. Sure. And that's, I mean, I think that's a common thread with all the Code Platoon graduates and alumni, which brings me to Charles. Charles, if you want to, how about you just share kind of a brief overview of how you got here and where you are now, and kind of same thing, I guess.
Yeah, sure. And sorry if there's some background noise. My furnace is a jet engine and I'm in Chicago. So it just kicked in behind me right before it was my turn to talk. Yeah, so I was in the Marine Corps from 2001 to 2005. I actually went to boot camp the day before the World Trade Center. I was an 0313, so light armored vehicle crewman. I did 2 trips to Iraq. And I actually had picked up a book on investing the second time I was in Iraq. I think someone else had left it laying around, and I just started reading and got interested in it. And when I got out, I actually went and got my bachelor's degree in management and finance. And so I then had from 2006 all the way up until about 2018, I was in finance. And finally, I just got sick of it and burnt out on it and decided that I needed a career change. And I was at the VA, and they had, one of the job counselors there told me about Code Platoon, and I had never heard of it before. And like, well, you may be interested in this, because he was kind of guiding me towards like, oh, well, like if you don't want to work at a brokerage firm anymore, I worked at a large national brokerage firm that's having a ton of fun with all the GameStop stuff going on right now. And I don't miss it.
Just reading about that. Just
yeah.
reading about that today.
So, and I would have been one of the people that had to deal with like all the people that would be upset about this. And he was like, well, if you don't want to do brokerage anymore, maybe you want to work in insurance or do something else finance related. And I was just looking at job after job online, and I was just like, I don't want to do any of this. Like, I'm just so burnt out on it, and talking to people about it. And finally, I think in my second or third trip in, he was like, there's this thing in Chicago called Code Platoon. And I took part in the in-person class when we were still allowed to have in-person things. And I had done like in community college, like all the way back in like 1999, 2000, I had done like a JavaScript class. And that was pretty much my extent of ever trying to program a computer, other than like writing some neat macros and VBA from Microsoft Excel for finance stuff. And I was like, you know what? That sounds like a good idea. And my wife thought I was nuts. Like, hey, you're leaving this career, like you're doing great. And I was like, yeah, I can't do it anymore though. I'm going crazy. And so dropped everything and basically looked at the questions for the entry questions, like the 6 questions they give you, and the free material, like pre-work that they give you, like freecodecamp.org, which is a great website. They just did a huge revamp on it. If no one's checked that out, it's definitely a great first step if you think you're interested in learning more about this stuff. Did all of freecodecamp.org, did all the JavaScript stuff, and then applied and got accepted. And that was like September of 2018. And I got accepted into Hotel Platoon, which actually started January 3rd or January 7th of 2019. And I did the full 4-month in person. As far as probably like the follow-up question that, like, how did your military experience help? The in-person program is kind of a fish tank. There were 10 of us shoved in a fairly small room. And I know Code Platoon's growing and accommodations are changing, but when we went through being in the military and used to being in close quarters for extended periods of time with people without wanting to get in fist fights, definitely paid off. And because it is, when they say it's a boot camp, it is a very much a boot camp like experience. For not having a lot of coding experience, it was funny because I've recently signed up to go back to community college, and I'm actually taking a Java course. And the first full class was just talking about the syllabus and expectations. Like, you show up to Code Platoon and it's not that type of classroom experience. It's like, okay, open your computer. We're going to install an IDE on here. And we've got 50 other things that we're going to accomplish today just before you can even start writing the code. Here's your homework. We'll see you back here at 8 a.m. tomorrow. And like the pace doesn't let up easily for the first 2/3 of the camp. But and everyone else in the room is going to be a military veteran or a spouse. So you have that stress, you have that tight quarters, but you also kind of have that kinship of like, you know, that everyone in there with you has experienced the same stuff, gone through the same things. Like there's a lot of teamwork that goes on. A lot of people think of like the stereotype of like a computer programmer, like I'm in an office, like with all the lights turned off and the windows closed, and I'm sitting by myself, being blinded by a monitor. And a lot of times in day-to-day programming, we do what's called pair programming. So you're almost always working with another person. You always have to be able to communicate. You always have to be able to look at code side by side with someone, and you learn all of those types of behaviors as well going into it. Not just how to code, but how to interact while you're coding.
I was going to say, I think just by the nature of pair programming and what it is, the military experience is hugely beneficial to that, so long as you're not just shouting at one another and knife handing all the time. But I mean, you know, if that works for both of you, you could do that too. So Charles, what is it that you do now, and how did you end up there?
Yeah, so I graduated, I completed Code Platoon in April of 2019, and I was able to secure a apprenticeship or an internship through Code Platoon with a local software company called A-Flight. We're a custom software company. Within the world of software, there's kind of two different companies, and the most common one is going to be like a Google or an Apple, where we call them a product company, and they are writing code for their own products, right? Google is writing code for Google, and Apple is writing code for Apple. We are a consulting firm, so we actually write code for other companies. We don't own a product of ourselves other than our website, which is just an informational website about who we are. I personally am actually working on a project that would be near to dear to everyone in this room. And I'm actually working with US MEPCOM right now. And I'm one of the software developers that's rewriting the US MERS program, which is if you join the military after 1994, January of 1994, we all got processed in on the same software. It is still in use today, which one is a testament that is a extremely long-lived piece of software for it not to have any major revisions. But with that being said, there's obviously issues if you have something that's going on 30 years old without a lot of major revisions. And we're doing a complete overhaul. We're bringing it into the AWS Gov Cloud, like secured computing environment. It's going to be a modern web application. And
oh, wow. So everybody
all,
in processes to the military is now, it's basically a cloud service in processing database.
Yep, starting in a couple of weeks, that's what it'll be.
That's fantastic. That's a cool project to be a part of, if nothing else. I mean, that's fascinating. And Jeffrey, how would that compare to what it is that you do now? And I guess, you know, what is it that you do now, and how does that compare?
Oh, that's kind of similar. I'm taking old legacy code and upgrading it. I work in data visualizations and in Angular now, and we're taking an old application that was written in a framework called Angular that was put out about 10 years ago, and taking those data visualizations and making them modern and things like that. So for a new web application as well.
That's cool. And you guys are, so this is a question that I get asked a lot, and both of you can comment. It appears that both of you are working from home right now. How has that transition been? Because this is a common question that we get here at Code Platoon is, you know, since the pandemic, I want to find something that I can work remotely. And I just wondering if you could offer some thoughts on that. Like, how easy is that transition, and how common is that in your world? Is everybody working from home now?
Well, I think programmers were the first ones to start working from home, or one of the first. So that's been in our sector for a while. But once COVID, everybody went home. Because there's not just programmers, but there's development team members, project managers. It gets really large. Everybody went home. So, but it's I get so much more done working from home as opposed to commuting into an office and things like that.
Absolutely. No, I can relate to that. Charles, what is it? Is almost everyone you work with remote as well?
Yes. Well, the contractor side of it, we're all remote. The government is stubborn, and they're all still showing up in an office up by Great Lakes Naval Academy. I see them crammed into their cinder block room when they're all wearing masks when they're on all of our conference calls. But as far as all of the developers, Eighth Light was already had, and this will be a common term that you'll hear in our industry, is a remote first culture. So like we took care. So if we had 6 people in the office and 6 people that were outside of the office, to avoid there being kind of like a center of gravity of the conversation, if everyone couldn't be present for the meeting, like we would all attend it virtually. So like even if 6 of us could go sit in a conference room somewhere, we'd actually go get individual rooms and sit on our own computers so that everyone was kind of on an even footing. So I mean, some companies are better at it than others. I think, especially like with tech, you end up having a lot of smaller companies in that space, and they're typically a little bit more nimble. When the whole COVID thing kicked off, we had our main office in Chicago, and then we had satellite offices in London, Austin, Madison, Wisconsin, Los Angeles, and New York City. We went to what was called we're basically indefinitely remote at this point. So we are keeping our Chicago office. We've divested, broke leases on all of our other properties across the world. And we have the ability and the expectation that basically we are going to be a remote company. And then we will, if you want to go to the Chicago office to go into work for whatever reason, you can. Definitely, like, I mean, for myself, it's me, my wife, and some cats. Like working from home is pretty easy for us. But for some of the developers that maybe had 2 or 3 kids at home, that's a whole different environment that you're working from.
Oh, absolutely. And I can relate to that. This morning I was doing kindergarten and first grade while also doing Code Platoon outreach. So it's a fun time with all of this. You know, on that note, do you guys see technological developments that are coming about in your fields because of all this? Like obviously when you know the market has a demand, those demands are generally met by some type of innovation. And right now the demand is, you know, more people at home, less people out doing things. Do you guys see advancements as a result of that?
Yes, mainly in incremental upgrades to the software. Like we use Google Hangouts a lot for our video conferencing, and like video or like Google Hangouts from basically like March of last year compared to what they are this year, with just like the improvement in softwares. And now that, I mean, millions of people are using it on a daily basis, just like the ability to flip into a grid view and the ability to run polls and raise your hand like you can in a Zoom meeting. And so it's just a lot of it right now is in software and needing people to write software to make it easier for you to write software. Code Platoon if you go to Code Platoon, they use VS Code. That's what I kind of learned to code on. The changes in VS Code with the launch of their live server. And like, it's one thing, like if I take code and I put it up on my screen and everyone can look at it and there's kind of a delay from what I'm typing and everyone's shouting out like, oh, you did this or you did that. Like I've already changed it because there's a delay, to like the VS Code live server where 2, 3, 8 people can all be looking at code and actually all see what everyone else is typing and can run and compile code remotely all on a server. And like that stuff didn't exist a year ago. So there's been some definite changes for quality of life and productivity in our space.
Sure. Jeffrey, anything from your end that you see as a development in that realm?
Not really. I love Visual Studio Code. Everybody should go out and get a copy today. And it is getting
Two
better.
thumbs up there.
Teams, we use Teams for communications. That's getting more and more stable, as it wasn't stable before Corona hit. It's stable now. And they're moving in that direction of streamlining things to make it easy to work from home.
Sure. No, and I think those are things that it's on everyone's mind. How are we adapting to this? Because obviously this is a monumental change that we're living through. So, how best to prepare yourselves. That actually ties into a couple. We've got some questions coming in that I'm gonna kind of tie some of these concepts together and let you guys, kind of bounce off of them. But in terms of your educational path, so one of you went to a coding boot camp, one went to college. Well, you both went to a traditional college, but for different reasons. How is the world and the environment that you're working in now? How is that different from the educational path that you took, and what was the biggest adaptation? Like Jeffrey mentioned earlier, you got to write code at some point, and college didn't quite offer that as much as they should. So what would you say is the biggest change, like getting into your job and you realize like, oh, this is a little different than what I learned? Or was your education a good preparation for that?
But yeah, you can't, in programming, you can't be afraid to jump in with both feet. Hopefully you have some background, or else you're just going to drown. But getting getting that experience under your belt, when you first start out, we do this learning curve things, but it's plateaus, and you reach the next plateau, and you see, oh my goodness, my code from a year ago was horrible. You continually do that every single year, and I have notebooks of code and theory and stuff like that, but you're continually evolving that, so you're continually driving your path and what you want to do. No, you got to work for people, but that's the cool thing, is you get to experience their business models, incorporate their data, find a great way to handle their data. That's kind of exciting for some people.
Sure, sure. It's scary for some, and I think that maybe the military background sets you up for success in that regard. We all of us know what it's like to be dumped into a totally foreign situation. We've all been in one place and then suddenly in another with a whole new group of people, and everything's new. So I think that's maybe easier. Charles, what have you seen? Like, you got out of Code Platoon, you got a job. What was the biggest adjustment? Like, did you see something that you thought, I wasn't prepared for this, or wow, this really prepared me well? Or what were your thoughts?
Every day is a not prepared for this. It's one of the reasons why I love coding, and kind of like what I was lacking in my previous career was that this is really challenging. Like, I say this at family get-togethers or to anyone that listens to me, like, if you think you're smart, try and program a computer and you'll find out if you're smart or not. And like, I thought I was a pretty smart guy. Like, I was finance, did all this, I was good at math, all this stuff. And I showed up and I was just like, why won't it do what I'm telling it to do? And and I still get that on a daily basis, where it's like, why won't the computer do what I'm telling it to do? And it's just because I'm not saying it right. It's not the computer's fault. And I think it's one of the great benefits of going to Code Platoon. So, and to liken it to myself, like I have a bachelor's of science in management and finance. For 3 years, I talked about trading stocks and learned about how capital markets work and how stock markets work. I didn't trade a single stock at school, right? And then I got a job at a brokerage firm, and I had to go through broker training, and that was like a 6-week class every day of learning how to be a broker and how not to do something dumb and lose a bunch of money on accident. And then the day after I graduated, I was trading stocks. So, and I didn't have to have a finance degree to go through broker training. So if you have a computer science degree, that's great. You've talked about computer science for 3 or 4 years, and you've learned way more about algorithms and data structures and how many data structures there are than you would by going to Code Platoon for 14 weeks, but you may not have actually written a ton of code. And that was kind of eye-opening for me. Like Code Platoon, the in-person, I recommend this to anyone out there is, and again, I know it's tough right now because of the pandemic, but like meetup.com and going to meetups in your local area, or like attending them virtually, where there's a meetup for every type of language, beginners, experts, everything. And we were learning Python, and we had to go to a Python meetup in Chicago. And I was talking to two individuals, and they were both graduating with master's degrees in computer science from the University of Illinois, Chicago. And I was showing them how to set up Visual Studio Code. Like, and I didn't know that they were master's students until we were done. But like the fact that I'm 8 weeks into Code Platoon and I'm showing them how to set up some of these tools that we use in the industry, because they don't use Visual Studio Code. They use whatever software the teacher forces them to validate code and submit their homework through, right? Which is what I'm going through now. Like, I'm not using an IDE that I want to use. I'm using the one they tell me I have to use. And so just things like that, where it was kind of eye-opening. So Code Platoon, if in the 14 weeks that they have you, basically they don't talk a lot about like learning how to drive a car. They just put you in it, and they shove you down the hill, and you figure it out as you go. It's kind of like the best way to put it.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And, you know, the analogy you use there of, you know, not just trying to program a computer and realizing whether or not you're intelligent. You know, I'm reminded of the great Nassim Taleb, who you'll appreciate because you're in finance. He's a big financial guru guy. And they said, what makes your opinion of, you know, on the markets any better than anybody else's? And he said, the difference with me is I wake up every day and I look in the mirror and I say, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have absolutely no clue what's going on. And I start from there. And I think that's a pretty good approach to everything, you know, have that humble attitude towards understanding and realizing there's so much we don't know. Kind of a different question. And there's a question, I actually just recently wrote a blog article on this, so I know how I'd answer it, but I want to get some input from you guys. We get this question a lot. What is the difference between data science and software development, code writing, things like that? So we get a lot of inquiries about data science. You know, what is the difference between data science and code writing, and basically the intricacies therein? Again, I know how I'd answer it. I actually use the analogy of beer making to write a blog article. So everybody go to codeplatoon.org and read it. If you want to read about beer making and how you can use that analogy, go for it. But Jeffrey, I don't know if you want to chime in there on your thoughts.
Well, data science involves machine learning and in getting this new sector that we have. We have web development, we have strict programming, we have application programming, but data science actually seems to be a back-end service that uses machine learning to crunch through the data that we're normally using to make websites and stuff like that. Crunch that data and make educated guesses in forecasts and things like that. Not artificial intelligence and Elon Musk. We're going all to the robots, but just simple machine learning. If this happens, this happens, this happens, we can pretty much count on D being the answer. So it's a brand new field. It's really fun. There's all sorts of avenues to go once you get into data science as well. There's levels of their industry. There's an engineer in charge of the stream, which I thought sounded kind of cool, but back end, front end, the same deal, but just another aspect to the industry.
Sure. Charles, how does that work on your end? Obviously, data science is a really important aspect of the end result of what you're working on now, because you're talking about in processing of potentially millions of personnel. So essentially that data is got to go somewhere. So how do you see that fitting in with what you do?
Yeah, and so I'm kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from Jeff. Like, I am a developer, so data science is important. It is definitely out there. I am not a data scientist. I don't work specifically with data other than visualizing on the screen. So I am a web developer. And right now in my current role, I'm what's called a front-end web developer. So I work on the part of the software that you actually see. So today I was actually working on some changes on the back end, and basically updating a part of our API, which is what the back end uses to move data around between different connection points that you can see in the program. So, and Code Platoon in and of itself is more of a boot camp to make you a full stack developer. I mean, I believe it says that right, kind of like at the top of the website. The section of it is dedicated to data science, and I know it is also a growing industry, and it's almost kind of like a buzzword right now, because you're actually seeing some pushback with you're not as cool as me, I guess is the way to put it. Like, you're seeing people that are real data scientists pointing fingers saying, well, they're not real data scientists. And so versus everyone saying I'm a data scientist and I'm a web developer. That's kind of the company that I work for has some people that are working on data science projects, and I may have the opportunity in the future, but, and again, the difference of working in a consulting company, I'm working on a DoD contract to write software for to process people who want to join the military. We have developers working on developing a Bitcoin exchange in Chicago. We have developers working for a delivery service that was using a long haul trucking app to control their local food delivery, and it wasn't working. So they basically are developing a app for local delivery services. We have a team that gets to travel to Munich, Germany twice a year because they're working for a insurance company out of Munich. So we're more all over the place. And what we would kind of call generalists. We do have a handful of specialists, but I'm expected to know React, like a front end web application or like web framework, and be able to pick up another one very quickly. And it doesn't matter if I'm working on, it doesn't matter what the end product is. I just have to know what the software is, or like how to write the software for it.
Sure. On that note, that ties in, there's a question that popped up too that, Charles, since you're already talking about some of this, how do you stay up to date on evolutions in your industry? Like, there's something new that comes out, and how much do you need to be aware of it? How much is that changing, or how much are you just doing with what you're handed?
So it is impossible to stay on top of everything, right? Like, I do not know C#. I do not know data science. I did Python in Code Platoon, and now I work a lot in Ruby and Rails. And so you will focus on keeping up to date on kind of where your center of attention is. And one of the good things about writing software is once you start a piece of software, it kind of freezes the programming language that you're using in time a little bit, right? So like if we started writing a piece of software and we were using React 13.1, right? And over the next 3 years, React goes to 13.12, all the way, like all these little integrations all the way up to React 16. We're not necessarily having to stay on top of each of those. Like our application is still rooted in React 13.1, and it would stay that way until there was a reason to bump it to a newer version. So, I mean, things are changing on a daily basis. Things are just zipping by. There's major releases, there's minor, especially I'm sure everyone saw it in the news, like the FireEye hack. A lot of changes in software and how we write software comes from security concerns, and basically bugs that get exploited and issued. And we're trying to update and constantly move around that. And we're always what's called patching software, which is making minor changes to it. But there is no expectation that, for your first 3 hours of every day is reading tech blogs and staying on top of it. I mean, if you're interested in it, you want to learn more about it, that's great. And like you should, and things are changing. There's always cool things coming out. When I went through Code Platoon, React hooks weren't really around yet, which is a really cool implementation of writing React. And we had to do it the old way with what they called the component lifecycle, and that's kind of gone by the wayside. So that's something that I learned to do it one way in Code Platoon, and then I was away from React for about a year. And then when I come back to it, I have to learn how to write it a newer way. But I still have this big base of 95% of React is exactly the way I left it. But now I've got to pick up this new 5%. And that's more of the incremental change that you deal with in software writing.
Sure. And Jeffrey, how does that play out in the world of data visualization?
Same way. I'm a developer. No, I'm just a fan of data scientists and what they're doing. But yeah, he's very correct. You get into a safe spot. You can develop there. My job, we're doing constant updates, so we're staying on the bleeding edge. So when you do come into work and you're working on something and you're trying to make it better, trying to modernize things, you are expanding your knowledge, you're developing. And he kind of glossed over that. He's messing around with the API. He's got a database out there. He's a JavaScript developer, but he's also doing all these other things and making all those other things slowly better. But our focus is on this application, this one thing. So it's fun though. I mean, you're learning how to do new things, implement, fine tune your coding skills, your code judo, I think they used to call it. But you're fine tuning those things that you've learned and brought up to an advanced level and up to an exceptional level. And writing beautiful, elegant code is just as fun as writing or writing a book or painting at that point.
And on that note, do you see, this ties into questions that we've received coming in. How do you see your role in what you're doing now evolving, and is it kind of limitless, the directions you can go, or do you plan on just kind of stay in the path, or?
Just whatever you want to do. Absolutely whatever you want to do. No, you got to work for people and you got to feed yourself and things like that. But if you're interested in a specific avenue of what we're doing, this web application is doing Facebook type stuff or Twitter type stuff. That's big right now. Those avenues are available that you start studying, you start getting really good, and then you get a job in that and you get better at it. And it's a lot of fun that way.
Sure. And do you guys see, so a question that kind of based on everything that you're telling me and kind of tying some of these things together that we get questions on, we all joined the military, right? And we had visualizations of what that was going to be and whether or not that was, envisioning yourself being the one who brought down Osama bin Laden or, whatever. We had visualizations of what it was going to be. And then it turned out to be not that, but in some ways it was better. What were the visualizations you had about software development, web development in general? And this is for both of you, but maybe it wasn't quite accurate, but it was actually better. And that's something you can tell people that would be coming in, coming into this, you say, hey, you think it's going to be this, but it's actually this, and that's better. Anything like that come to mind as far as your experiences go?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Sorry, Charles. I expected a hierarchical system. The boss says this and hands it down to a senior, and the senior hands it down, and piecemeal out work and stuff. And I thought I'd be writing comments on code. No, your first job, you're writing code. You're in the thick of it, and sink or swim. If you don't work out, then go away. If you do work out though, then they hand you more stuff that you don't know. And coming to work, it's fun though, like that. You know what you're generally going to do. You don't exactly know how you're going to do it though. That's kind of fun.
Which is kind of cool. And I tell that to prospective students who are trying to do the challenges for the application. And to all the listeners, we'll kind of get into that in a little bit in a minute before we close out. But, every job as a developer, every day, you're doing something that hasn't been done before by nature of your job. So you've got to be willing to do something brand new. So Charles, do you have any thoughts on the same general question?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that one were pleasant surprises for me moving into the tech industry. One is the amount of collaboration. Again, I go back to the stereotype of like locking yourself in a room in the dark, and like you even hear people say, like, the people that work in client-facing jobs or that like retail jobs, like, oh man, I wish I had a job where I didn't have to talk to people. And coding is not necessarily that job. Like, I talk to people all day long, be it that I'm coding with them or that we're going over requirements for the software, or that like our what's called a UAT team, which is like a user acceptance testing team, has gone through a piece of software that they've written or that we've written, and then they're basically intentionally trying to break it, and they're going to come back to me and say, this is what we found. And then I have to take someone that maybe that isn't a developer and figure out what they're doing, and then go back to the code with it to stop them from being able to break it in that manner. The other thing is, and this is especially for people that are going to be moving into the industry, like going through the Code Platoon path or any boot camp, is and they tell you this in Code Platoon. I hate to steal their thunder, but the instructor we had on our first day basically said, like, hey, you're going to come in, you're going to sit down, you're going to feel uncomfortable because people have some experience, some people don't have any experience, and you're going to go through Code Platoon and you're going to say, well, hey, at the end of this, I'm a 5 out of 10, and someone else may be an 8 or 9 out of 10. Well, guess what? Once you get into your career, it's out of 100. So the best person in Code Platoon may be a 9 out of 10 and you're a 5 out of 10, but at the end of the day to the company, you're a 5 out of 100 and they're a 9 out of 100. Both of that, as far as like being a fully functional, self-sufficient programmer that I can hand you a piece of work and expect you to get it done, it's not great. And most companies, especially the companies that work with Code Platoon, aren't expecting that. But what they are expecting is you to be like a 90 out of 100 as a good human being. Right? Like we talk about the technical skills, and it doesn't matter the career field. And I'm sure everyone may have had this experience in or out of the military. Nobody wants to work with the really smart jerk. Right? And so you can be this like uber programmer, but like if you eat the junior developers, like nobody wants to work with you. And so what they're looking for as you leave a boot camp is that you are eager to learn, that you demonstrated that you learned what they were teaching in the boot camp, but that you are someone that they want to work with on a personal level, that they want to sit, because like when you pair program, especially when everyone's vaccinated again, I mean, you sit shoulder to shoulder and you look at the same monitor with someone. And you don't want to do that with someone that makes you grind your teeth all day long. So that was also one of like the kind of, again, like the stereotype buster, right? Like there's a ton of collaboration and they're looking for people that are capable of collaboration. And that is a huge leg up that you will learn, that you get from the military, right? Like we know how to communicate. Like we know how to communicate quickly, efficiently, get messages across, right? And those are all things that'll set you up for success in this type of career.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
But as well, you mentioned that earlier, Charles. You got the opportunity to start talking about code with other people, and that's we know how to communicate in the military, but explaining complex topics to other people that understand code, but they're still complex topics, and to develop that rapport with other developers, giving them the trust that they're not going to roll their eyes and just say, oh, it's a computer problem, it's a glitch somewhere, you know. We don't have that option. They'll understand you and you can understand them. That's a wonderful experience and really helpful when you're starting to go into roles that you are your own person, you have a lead developer and things like that. at least you have a common language that you can speak, let alone computer code, English language between computer programmers and developers.
Would you say then it's fair to say, I mean, obviously in every job, one of the people talk about this in management classes all the time at undergrad, grad school level, in seminars, doesn't matter. Talk about communication in businesses and how, communication breakdowns are a serious problem. Would you say then that that's a fundamental component of being a programmer, and communicating concepts to one another is a hugely desired quality?
Absolutely essential. Yeah. If you can't do it, you're not going to develop great software. You'll develop this little tiny piece that you understand and nobody else can understand it. Because as you start to explain and interact with other developers, then you can also write tests and you can also write documentation because you know how we think about this. It's absolutely essential.
I think that might be one of the misconceptions maybe that a lot of people have. Like Charles said earlier, the stereotypical vision of somebody sitting in their basement and the kind of the basement dwelling loner who's an expert coder. But like what you guys are saying is like, no, communication with your fellow workers, your fellow programmers, your fellow developers is essential. And I think that's one of the cool things that Code Platoon does. They take some time out of the curriculum to walk through some of these concepts instead of just saying, hey, we're going to make you the expert programmer. Like Charles said, that doesn't do you any good if you're a jerk who can't communicate with other people. So I think from what I understand about some of the other coding schools out there, Code Platoon maybe does a little bit better simply because of the experience of leadership and where they've been, what they've done, and realizing how important that is. Charles, would you say that's fair to say, or I mean, you've been through the program, so you'd be the person to ask.
Yeah, that is and again, it's kind of, again, terminology you'll hear a lot moving into this industry is soft skills. So the ability to interact with people. Code Platoon focuses on that as well. They're part of the curriculum, at least on a weekly basis. You'll have discussions about like do's and don'ts and basic etiquette, right? Like, I mean, I was an 0311, 0313. Most of the people in my MOS ate rocks, right? And now you're walking, and again, I had a long career outside of the military before I did this, so I was fairly well adjusted. But I mean, if you're coming in straight out of the military, like civilian life can be hard sometimes. And Code Platoon is a great primer on how to interact with people that don't have that military experience. And the tech industry is if not the most, one of at least top 10 progressive industries in this country, right? Like you are going to run into the Geico commercial, the two guys sitting in the hardware store trying not to stare at the person with blue hair, like
right.
Like, I mean, when I interviewed at one of the companies for apprenticeships, like I was interviewed by a transgendered individual. Like, I mean, these are all things that you may not come across in the military, but that are very, very prevalent in the tech community, and having your feet underneath you. And basically, I mean, just about knowing how to act when you get to that point is very important. And Code Platoon focuses on that part as well.
Which I think is a hugely beneficial thing. It just doesn't do any good to have super experienced coders out there who can't communicate with another human being and treat them like human beings. More importantly, I guess I should say. We have just a few minutes left on our time. One of the questions I think is a good kind of one of the final questions we can ask. We have somebody that's actually starting November Platoon on Monday who asked if there's anything that you could or would have known or like to have known, wish you would have known before starting Code Platoon, what would it be?
Get ready. I again, I think they probably are still sending it out in the pre-work. And for anyone that hasn't gotten to the point of even soliciting the pre-work from Code Platoon, freecodecamp.org is an amazing place to start. I really do the pre-work. I did all the pre-work. I watched people really, really struggle. That there was a couple of individuals that attended that did not do the pre-work. And there is no slowing down. Like, they're not going to hold the class up because you didn't make the effort to do the basically what I would estimate about 40 to 50 hours worth of pre-work before you start. And if you haven't done the pre-work, get as much of it as you can done. Get as much as you can done by Monday, because every little bit helps. And the other thing too is, if I think a lot of people that go through Code Platoon, or if they're still requiring it, like to use a Mac versus a PC, like I was a lifelong PC user, get familiar with how to use a Mac if you just picked one up. Any of that before time is great. And I'll throw out a developer word that everyone can look into. If you have never been on github.com before, that is a vital part of software development, and no one really talked about it. I didn't know it existed until I became a software developer. But your very first day, you'll learn Git. So you're going to go to Code Platoon and you're going to learn like JavaScript and Python, but you're also going to learn Git, which is a language in and of itself. And that is what we use to control the versions of software and make it possible for other people to collaborate on software without breaking it continuously. And that throws a lot of people for a loop. So anything you can read up on Git management before you go will help you as well, big time.
Sure. And Jeffrey, since you didn't go to Code Platoon, what advice would you give to anybody in this position? What would you have done differently with your career, and what do you wish you would have known that you know now?
Well, one of your students is getting ready to go on Tuesday, so get lots of sleep, drink water. You need to keep your brain, supple. Neuroplasticity is a thing. Take care of yourself, get enough sleep, eat well. Jumping in, I normally do 60, 80 hours of code on a regular basis now. So get used to this. This sounds like a great program, because you're not just learning JavaScript. Charles said that, like he mentioned, Git's this whole language developed by Linus Torvalds that nobody actually knows how to work, but you learn these commands, and absolutely every single time it works perfect. You can send your piece of code to somebody else. They bring it up and they look at your code. It's pretty neat, but it's something that you have to learn. You have to learn styling standards and LESS and CSS and all sorts of different things that people aren't expecting. But for your student on Tuesday, good luck. It's going to be a lot of fun. And a lot of learning, and just don't give up. Never give up. Not in programming. You just can't do that. Until somebody tells you to stop working on that issue, which probably will happen once or twice. You just keep trying.
Fantastic. Well, let's see trying to find the slideshow, but it seems to have gone away. I don't know where my slideshow went here. There we go. There we go. So we just have a couple of minutes left. So today, my name is Greg Drobny. Please, for those of you out there who want more questions answered and didn't get your questions answered today, or want to dig more in depth into this, please do email me. This is my job. It's my job to talk to people in your position who want to know more. So don't hesitate to shoot me an email. Jeffrey and Charles, both, first of all, thank you guys. Thank you both for joining us, for taking the time out of your day to jump in and offer your thoughts, because I think it's invaluable to talk to people who are actually working out there and doing this. I can say all day long, I can tell you what Code Platoon does, but at the end of the day, that's a 14-week program that's launching your career. And, you know, getting a career is the goal. That's the ultimate goal. So for those who are interested in Code Platoon and you haven't started the application part yet, just as a very quick overview, and again, please email me to set up a time to talk and we can discuss this further. But part one of our application, so if you go to our website right now, hit apply now, it's going to take you to an information gathering page that just asks you for basic info about you. After that, you're going to have a little bit more involved application process, and there are going to be some coding challenges that you have to go through. The first question that comes to people's mind is, well, I'm coming to Code Platoon to learn code. Why do I have to do code to learn code? The simplest answer is we provide the resources necessary to get through these coding challenges, and they're free. So we have a couple of free programs that you can go through yourself. Intro to Coding and Bootcamp Prep are both designed to take you from zero knowledge of coding up to the point where you can pass those coding challenges and become part of the Code Platoon family. So again, that's something that I'm happy to discuss in more detail should you email me, and I encourage you to do so. Upcoming cohort dates. We've got our next available date is May 24. The deadline to apply for that is February 21st. So if you're going to apply to that, start this process very quickly. You will need to get going on the application. Pop-up Platoon starts October 4. Quebec Platoon starting January 24. At this time, we're only running one evenings and weekends cohort per year. So that's kind of just working the evenings, weekends, and one weekend day. We're only doing one of those per year, and that's been finalized for 2021 already. So next year would be the next opportunity for that one. Beyond that, that's about it. Do you guys, Charles or Jeffrey, do you have any other thoughts you want to share real quick with anybody?
Yeah, one last thing I'll throw out. Super happy I did Code Platoon. Absolutely no regrets. It's made a huge change in the amount of satisfaction I have in my life switching into this type of career.
Fantastic. Good to hear. And thank you for coming through Code Platoon and being part of the webinar tonight. Jeffrey, do you have any final thoughts?
Oh, it's just good luck to all the new people, even thinking about, if you're thinking about coding, try it. Try it to go to Code Platoon. You know, try something like that. And that will show you if I think you're going to love it. It's a fantastic career path. It's a lot of fun. It's 90% tears, but there's 10% is just absolute fun.
That's awesome. The juice is worth the squeeze, as they say, right? Well, thank you to both, again, Jeffrey Sanford, Charles Kubiak. Thank you both for your time. And again, anyone who needs to answer or have more questions answered, wants to talk about this in more detail, please do email me. We are turning this into a part 2 as well. So please stay tuned to Code Platoon for when that's going to be, and we'll get a little bit more in depth on a couple of other topics. So please stay tuned, get on our email list, and we'll be updating everyone. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever it takes, whatever the kids are doing these days. And thanks again to our guests. Thank you to the people behind the scenes, Brenna, who's put this together. And to all you out there, thanks for joining us. Thanks for learning more about Code Platoon, and we hope to see you soon in a cohort near you in the future. So thanks, guys. Appreciate your time, and talk to you all soon.